Yes, another post-reaction video. These are easy to do and can still give one some study time if one has the time to do so, which in a working household with a dependent isn't easy. There's one about a post called Take the Bible, which as you can see has a list of topics that if you use the Bible as a reference book for, you'll get in serious trouble. Unlike many I tend to respond to, it lacks the clarifying scripture references to aid in not only isolating their assumptions, but figuring out their thoughts. However, I'm pretty confident I can figure out what they're referring to in this. This essay will be triggering towards the end because I'll be struggling not to use a word that many atheists don't understand or even appreciate being used in these sorts of posts. I'm not going to use it if I can avoid it, and odds are you'll figure it out pretty early on, whilst we dive into what they think will lead you into trouble if you use the Bible. Geography. This one has no biblical passages associated with it, but if you bear in mind the Bible mentions much of the Roman Empire and some countries not under its sway, the Bible gives us a view of the world that stretches from Spain to India and from Romania to Ethiopia. Whilst percentage-wise there's still a tiny area of the globe, it's not the 1% of the surface that this post is suggesting. It's nearer 5%. That may be nitpicking, but for a book that isn't meant to be used in geography, it's still pretty good. History. The Bible has focused its history on the Middle East, in the same way that the Diaries of Samuel Pepys is a focused history of Tudor England. It's not as sensational as the grand events of the works of Shakespeare, nor as meticulous as an actual historian of the day, but it gives us a personal insight into the everyday man of those times. The Bible does this too, and includes multiple viewpoints and works by the elders of the tribes as well. Whilst not a singular source of historical information, it has helped archaeologists find places they might not have found otherwise. So you're not exactly bottom of the class if you use this. Biology. Despite it not mentioning much about anatomy beyond the male member, the act of human reproduction, and Roman execution techniques, the Bible does give us one of the first references to germ theory, not in name precisely, but with not only passages referring to unclean fluids, but also means of potential transmission of STDs, as well as a method of checking the virginity of someone beyond the assumed checking at the hymen. It may not get you many marks in a biology exam, but then again, it's not meant to. Cosmology. Likely referencing Genesis 1, cosmology as a study is only a subfield of astrophysics and is, in some ways, a look at creation in general rather than the stars in particular. In terms of creation, as I said before, it's closer to the scientific understanding of the start of the universe than many would expect, assuming I allow the time to be loose in understanding. Far from knowing less than nothing, you have a better understanding than many might want you to believe. Medicine. Quite apart from not having a pharmacopoeia on drugs or even herbs in the Bible, it only mentions things in reference to certain afflictions that could have been curable, like leprosy. That being said, it references a solution that triggers miscarriage, maybe a late stage form of contraception. circumcision, which is a legitimate form of treatment today, and strong advice regarding being around certain animals and the consumption of their meat, especially when it's not going to be good for human consumption, or potentially carry diseases and parasites. In short, given the standard of medicine at the time, you will be okay following the advice given, though in this day and age, medical research must come first in this field. Military ethics. Clearly referencing the Israelites' conquest of the Promised Land against the tribes, the strategies, motivations and justifications have been similar to ones floating around military courts for years. Banditry and terrorism, wipe them out. Give them years to change their ways, and if they refuse, they had their warning. Practice barbaric ways of treating one's citizens and putting them at great risk, convert them to a better way of governance. If this is considered war crime, then you reduce the actions of the Third Reich to a mere philosophical differences, or makes us all war criminals. Childcare. This is referenced in the classics in Exodus, Numbers, Proverbs and Deuteronomy. Whilst taking a negative view on them isn't unreasonable, when considering the alternative parenting style is wild, uncontrolled, undisciplined layabouts who don't respect anyone or anything, a general guide to parenthood in this case is less likely to have one's children removed from them than letting them be the way they would be otherwise. But there are many interpretations that would indeed require your children to be taken away for their own safety. This is down to the individual, not the source of information. Law. Given the basics of Western law are based on the Ten Commandments, this is a stupid one. Disregarding stealing, murdering, and cheating would just as easily have one not only be disbarred, but possibly put on a watch list. Whilst other laws in the Bible can be seen as bad, this is where understanding of the laws overrules the written word of the law, so removing it from the shelf is detrimental to this aim. Human rights. Odds are a reference to slavery, which again, when looked at appropriately, is not only beneficial to the economy, but also nowhere near as bad as surrounding nations. Interpretations of the law may well differ, but again, it is no reason to remove them from the shelves. I think you can tell what the trigger word was, and just how hard it is to go through that whole list without having it in every single sentence. If you haven't guessed it, it was context. Yes, this entire list is taking the Bible out of its intended context and claiming it will only get you in trouble for it. To be brutally frank, it is the exact same thing that would happen with many other books when you do that. In terms of geography, I don't think my geology textbook is going to help on my OS map of Lauderdale. I could go through the whole thing, but I have a feeling we'll be here forever. But here's the important thing. Nowhere in the Bible does it say it is the source of all knowledge. That has never been a doctrine of the church. And as far as I'm aware, only a handful of the most extreme fundamentalists believe the Bible is the source of all knowledge. And even then, they still may take things in the world as information comes to them, and even use media to inform them of events that links to their beliefs. Even the doctrine of sola scriptura, the basis of Protestantism, is understood to mean the Bible is the sole infallible source of authority for Christian faith and practice. Not all knowledge, but the basis of Christian teachings. What they're doing is essentially like taking Mrs. Beecham's first recipe book and saying that this is the source of all knowledge. It isn't, because it was never meant to be as such. It's a recipe book, mainly for jam and marmalade. So if we took that for any of those subjects on the list they just gave, we'd be laughed out of the room, possibly followed by a bear with a wide-brimmed hat asking for a sandwich. This is a completely ridiculous way of trying to disprove the Bible. Whilst it was an interesting exercise in restraint and basic scriptural understanding, I honestly think even Richard Dawkins would shake his head at this because of the blatant disregard of context. Some might say I'm taking a silly argument too seriously. I think if you don't take an argument seriously, no matter how silly it seems, they will start to believe it as being the be-all, end-all, with no comeback at all. If you want to take the Bible away from your bookshelf, it's your library, your choice. But when you see it in the context it was meant to be, you learn so much more. In terms of religion, it is the authority on Christian teachings. In terms of archaeology, it gives us a starting point to look for many places for digs. In terms of history, it gives one an understanding of people's mindsets at the time, whether we believe the events happened or not. In terms of music, it inspires some of the greatest music artists that have ever lived and continues to inspire more today. In terms of our understanding of God, it is a good place to start. But it's not the only source of today's miracles. So keep things in context. Stay humble, stay safe, and God will be with you, my friend.